Welcome to Season 2 of Legal Luminaries, the Paralegal Edition. We are excited for today's interview with attorney Ruth Hauswirth. AFP's podcast, Legal Luminaries, shines a spotlight on the insights, trends, and voices shaping the future of paralegal education and the legal profession. Legal Luminaries is designed to connect you with thought leaders, innovators, and trailblazers in the legal field. And with me today is my co host and fellow paralegal educator, Kelly Radnathy. So let's dive into today's discussion. And I wanted to kind of get to know about your background a bit, Ruth. So would you mind sharing about your journey into law and wellness and advocacy and mindfulness?
Well, thank you. It's so wonderful to be here with you both. Thank you for having me. Uh, my journey into law. So just to kind of, I've been. This is my 30th anniversary at Cooley, which I'm very excited about, and I think that is an important part of my story. um, I came to law because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and it somebody that I trust said, it's a very intellectual a profession. You probably will really like it. And so I did some research, and next thing you knew, I was a lawyer. And there's nobody in my family that it was just kind of a like it's a little bit of a I kind of can't believe how I ended up there. It wasn't something that I spent my whole life thinking about like some people. But I really found the I don't know, just the how it's always changing, like it's not static. That was something that really interested me. And so yeah, so and I started practicing, interestingly, as I said, in the mid 90s. And we didn't really, I mean, we were just starting to use computers back then. We didn't have email was kind of a thing, but not really. And we still called each other on the phone and wrote letters, and it was very much a paper world in those days. But I was right at that cusp when we were starting to deal with electronic information. And I was a litigator. I was a trial lawyer, and I don't know. I one day I just had this kind of I think I was looking at like going through emails, and back then it was literally just like going through clients' emails trying to figure out, is this important? Is this important? And I remember thinking to myself, there's got to be a better way. And there's got to be a better way. And lo and behold, my career just continued. I was fortunate to work with amazing people at a firm that really aligned with me in terms of how just how I could be me, and worked with people who really supported me and mentored me. And then around it was around 2000, 2003, 2004. There was a lot of, I was very involved in one of my passions became very clear. It's always been kind of something I was interested in, but I got very involved in training and professional development at the firm. My practice kind of veered toward, and then that was when my practice kind of veered toward electronic discovery. There were a lot of changes that were happening, discussions of changes to the federal rules of civil procedure, which were going to be pretty profound changes. That was like, they went into effect in 2006, but the process starts way before that. And I got really interested in that and sort of became the person at the firm that was dealing with it. And whether I think it was sort of a stroke of just kind of luck, I made a pitch to create a department. I thought that this was profoundly transformational in terms of the way that legal litigators are going to practice. And so that's how I got into e-discovery. And I was like, it just wasn't a thing. Like back then we created it, and it wasn't just me. It was people who are still with me on my team, building this department from scratch. And my practice and my focus for the last probably 17 years has been strictly on e-discovery, counseling, our attorneys, but also our clients on everything related to e-discovery and from before litigation preparedness and information governance all the way through trial. So I didn't expect to become a technology lawyer and understanding and an e-discovery lawyer, but that's very little I've learned in my life is planned out.
That's a
Right?
great, great background, right, Kelly? I feel like we are all simpatico here because Kelly and myself and you were all in litigation. And, I did touch upon your journey into the law, but also I mentioned some of the topics that we really wanted to
Yes.
chat with you about today on wellness and advocacy. And, I can only imagine, especially starting out as a trial lawyer, because, obviously there's a little bit of that adversarial, right? Tendency in that type of environment. But,
Yes.
when you say you went on and started pioneering like this department, this brand new department in your firm, that also had probably some sort of, I don't know, maybe fear or an anxiety that you might have had. And how are we going to do this and scale it, firm wide? And how are we going to get all of our people to
Hmm.
understand what this is, especially as you're kind of iterating as it's evolving, as we are now with AI, right? With
Oh,
generative
absolutely.
artificial
It feels very
intelligence.
familiar.
Right? It's like when you started back in the day, right? And so Kelly and I are around the same era as you when we entered into law. Yesterday, we were speaking to a group and we said, collectively, we have about 50 years of experience. And I'm like, I know we still look young, but we were there when the internet just started and was a
That's right.
thing, right?
That's
And so I
right. That's
wondered
right.
too, like with all of these maybe elements of stress or, like I said, maybe fear or anxiety that may be part of your journey, what was that, and how did you integrate kind of that well-being aspect and your to preserve your sanity into developing like these departments and facing these unknowns? What was that like integrating that kind of well-being mindset into your journey as a
Well,
legal
I will say I didn't early on. I didn't. I was so when I was kind of in that like growing my career phase, building this out, being very, I was so just interested in how technology was changing the way that specifically litigation practice was needing to be done. Like, and I focused a lot on how are the rules going to affect the way we change, but it was more than that. It was I had this my strategy, my idea, really, and the way we built it was that practicing law wasn't going to just be traditionally the way it'd been. We're going to need, obviously the legal piece is going to be huge, that's a huge part of it, but the process piece was going to be really important, and the technology piece, like people process technology. And it was this very fascinating different way of looking at the way we approached things. And so I just went full steam ahead. I had, I at the time I was again responsible for training, and I think, and that's how I got very involved in e-discovery, because at the time I was being flooded with, hey, we want to come into your firm and talk to the lawyers and the paralegals about this new technology that you need to in order to be able to handle discovery. And it was just inundation, kind of like it is today. That's why I said it's sort of familiar. Then, and I'm just doing that without paying attention to uh, paying attention to just everything else. I had all my responsibilities for my day job, if you will. I was building this department. I was also at a stage in my life where I had a young child. I was a single mom at the time, and I had parents that were aging, and I just kept going and going, because part of it was because it was really exciting to me. Legal technology, the intersection was very interesting to me. And I was, when you're doing work that you really care about and that you think is, you're driving it yourself, it's not being put on you, there's a lot of energy around that. But it was also too much. It was also too much. I wasn't, but to your point, I wasn't paying attention to my well-being. I wasn't paying attention to the signs that it was too much. So at the point was I wasn't paying attention really all that much to uh, my well-being. I didn't have a frame of reference around some of the things that we talk about today. We just weren't talking about back then either. I think that I'm the reason why I talk about well-being and meditation and the things that we're getting into today on this podcast, and why it's a part of what I do out in the legal profession now in the legal world, is because I didn't have those skills. I didn't have awareness around my own well-being, my own boundaries, my own, even like just even I being able to identify like what was my core, like what was driving me, what was my core, what were my core values. Um, and it was it was around 2012, 2010, 2012, when I started to have some health challenges. I had some really severe, I had a back injury, and that kind of set me on a course of needing to slow down. I just literally had to, because there's a book, the title is When the Body Says No, by Magor Mate, and it's like my body literally just said no. It just stopped and said no. And so that was when, so I my body just it's like if I was going to continue to not pay attention, it was just going to yell louder. And that's when I started. I was very fortunate. I had a wonderful, my husband is very supportive, and he was the one who really helped me through that back injury. And then the back injury kind of led into, uh, I think, the burnout and everything that I had been trying to be everything and do everything. I finally had to confront, okay, I was doing too much. I was doing too much. And that was when the first time I had a lovely therapist at the time who was, it was the first time I ever heard about meditation. It was the first time I ever heard the some of the things that she said to me in those early sessions when I didn't think I was depressed, but she, uh, she's a therapist. She was able to see things that I wasn't really paying attention to. And one of the things she said to me that really woke me up was, if you, like when you had your back injury, or let's say, because I was just like, I have to get back to it. I have to get back to it. I was just so driven, and I was kind of pretty hard on myself. Like, I'm better. I should be able to get back right into it and just go, go, go. And she said if you had a broken arm, or you would pause and you would get the arm set in a cast. Why is it hard for you to realize that you need to slow down because of depression? Why is it hard for you to care for yourself? Because I felt like that was just me being weak, like I was just not having a positive enough attitude. I really think that a lot of the conditioning of, sort of, I call it, I refer to it as toxic positivity almost, that I was not confronting what was right in front of me. And I didn't really have skills and capacity at the time to do that. And so it was that point that she introduced me to something called mindfulness-based stress reduction. And it's an 8-week course that uh, you can Google that, MBSR, or mindfulness based stress reduction, and there are courses available through almost every health health organization, universities, hospitals. It's a very well tested, researched program that focuses on using mindfulness and meditation to help with stress management, and as the name suggests. And I, like my same kind of A student way of being. I was like, okay, I can do an 8-week class and this will make me better. And I did the class. I did everything they told me to do. And there were some significant changes. In addition to, I was also in therapy, um, but the mindfulness meditation really started to make a difference. And what really kind of, I think where I really had a major shift was about 4 or 5 weeks into the class. Like I said, it's 8 weeks. And normally in the mornings when I would walk my dog, I would be totally like going over everything that I had to do in my day. So I'm out in the beautiful park walking my dog in the morning before work, and I would be like, okay, like, hurry up. I got to get back. Like, I've got to do this. I've got to do this. I've got to do this. And I adore my dog. This is my another dog who's since passed over the Rainbow Bridge. But I was so not present with him. Like, I would just, like, the whole time I would just be planning what I was going to be doing later. And it was only through this class, this one day I was out walking, and I noticed myself noticing that I wasn't present with my dog.
Isn't that wild?
It was wild. It was one of those a real pivotal moment where I think something shifted in me. And this is kind of funny, but I remember that day walking him, and instead of like rushing him to finish he's just sniffing. He's catching up on the news in the neighborhood. I was so transfixed by him like just looking at him like what an amazing thing a dog is, and then watching his butt wiggle. Like, I know that just sounds so like, but the butt wiggle was a really big deal for me because I had this like feeling. It was just this feeling that I hadn't had in so long of just, it was joy. It was, and I didn't need any elaboration on it. It was just being with my dog. And I really, and to kind of move it along, that was, I think, a really pivotal point for me. And I really stuck with the mindfulness, like meditating, like whatever they told me I was supposed to do every day, I did it. And it really started to make a difference. My husband started to notice, at one point he said to me, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And I said, why? And he said, I don't know, I'm noticing that you're just a little less reactive, and there's just there's a little more spark that I haven't seen in a while. And that was, that's how I got started with that. And the butt wiggles remain a very important part of I have my very important, what I will call a glimmer in my day. And I can talk more about why glimmers are important later.
Absolutely, Ruth. And I'm so glad you brought up the glimmer side of this, right? Because as you know, and just sort of thank you for sharing that journey of yours and that personal story, because it's really important for us as legal professionals to understand we all are going through and face these challenges in front of us. And what's really fascinating, I think, that you just kind of explored a little bit is how you became this sort of subject matter expert in so many different areas, because your brain is, that sponge, and you want to take it on and you want to keep feeding the brain. But we also entered this like information highway that if you didn't keep up to speed, you were getting off on an exit, and maybe faster than you wanted to. But that also meant information overload for us, right? I mean,
Totally.
learning from every single angle, no matter which way you looked, and the cases that were presented to us, and then the technology, that was, put in front of us. It's like, well, you have to learn this because you have to do this. And, but that passion then drove us, right? And so where I really, what really resonates with me is how that acknowledgement, right? Like we kind of have to have our boundaries crossed before we're like, whoa, this doesn't feel right. And we see it in the legal profession, both being legal professionals as well. But on the professional or on the legal educator side, how can we help others prepare for this, right? Before the spiral actually happens, because as you had mentioned, once we're in that spiral, it's really hard to even be aware that we're spiraling until, something so simple as our dog's butt wagging, we're snapped back into like, oh my gosh, there are little joys in life and we've just been overlooking them. So what would you suggest as, some preparation or tools for that emotional preparedness that legal professionals are going to face in this career?
Absolutely. And somebody said to me early in my career, obviously didn't take it to heart until much later, but nobody is going to come to you and say, Ruth, I think you're just overdoing it. You're just, you're succeeding too much. You're fulfilling you're checking all the boxes too well. Like, it's just not going to happen. And I just think there's like an ethos of push, 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 go, go, go. And there's like anything, there's a very positive side of that. But there's also a downside if you don't have awareness about the things that we're talking about. And so the things that I think, this is what I would say to what can legal educators and legal professionals do to help each other and to bring more awareness around this is, I think of this idea of flourishing and well-being, whatever you want to call it, which is a very personal thing to define. And I think that is an important thing to kind of spend time thinking about, is what does that mean to me? But what I say is to think of it as like skills that we can develop, just like you develop your skills to write better, or to develop your skills to be a better presenter, educator, whatever it is, lawyer, paralegal. Your well-being, again, how you define that, not the culture or your conditioning from your family or whatever it is, and that different stages of our life have different, it might change. But it's like, these are what was really helpful for me was learning that this was not a failing on my part. I just didn't have the skills. No one taught me how to recognize when I was maybe veering off. Uh, and also, you know, the I just feel like I have to mention this. I think most people have a sense of this, but our 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 brains work in a certain way. So we are all built in, and it's all for survival. It's not a, I always say it's not it's a feature, not a bug, that we have what's called the negativity bias. It's what's kept us alive in many ways, over the course of our evolution, and it's our probably most primitive part of our brain, sensing danger, sensing something is a threat. What happens in modern times, our brains haven't evolved to not understand that having 400 emails in your inbox, or having somebody email you that's really upset about something that happened, that's not like a tiger coming to attack you. And our brains, like, if we're not careful about understanding those processes, a lot of stressors that we encounter in our lives, we're kind of continually in this fight, flight, or freeze stage, that sort of primitive brain stage that's like everything is a threat. And I think learning about how our systems work, how our nervous systems work, and when I say I mean our personal nervous systems. There is no one right way for anybody to respond to the stressors in their life. I have a particular, different way than you. Both of you might respond to things, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I think that we're kind of pushed to be in sort of a cookie cutter kind of way of dealing with things. And this is one of the things I would always emphasize, is these are skills that we can all learn, capacities that we can all build. Just like we go to the gym to build up our muscle, you can't walk into the gym and pick up 100-pound weight. You need to do it over time. It takes time to build these capacities, and understanding a little bit. We don't have to become brain scientists, but understanding that we have to work with our nervous systems. We have to work with the fact that our systems pick up stress that we may not even consciously pick up. I thought about this a lot during the pandemic, where I had a very difficult time during the pandemic, as I think, most people did. But there were things that I think were our systems as a collective society, maybe not even been focusing, that our systems were picking up, as we are under a deadly threat. Like, and nobody was really talking about like how we take care of ourselves through that. And that's a pretty dramatic example, but that's how our days can be without any awareness. So the primary skill, I think, that helped me was learning to pay attention to what was going on both inside me and outside me. That's where the meditation, I think the mindfulness meditation really had that, that really had an impact on me, and why I stuck with it, why I decided in 2020 it was so helpful to me. In addition to the other piece of it is the learning the self-compassion piece. That's another skill that you wouldn't necessarily think of that as a skill, like treating yourself with the same kindness that you would treat probably a stranger. Maybe more. Most of us would not want anyone to know like what the inside of our heads sound like. I think we all think that, I don't know. I wouldn't want anybody inside my head. I'm much better than I used to be. But
Right.
like when I was referring earlier to that, when I was sitting across from my therapist, and she was like, "You're being so hard on yourself. If you had a broken arm, you would get your arm set. Why are you so hard on yourself about depression? Depression is a thing. It's a real experience you're having that can be treated, and there's nothing wrong with you because you have it." But I had so much just like harshness toward myself, like, well, if I was a stronger person, I wouldn't be having these feelings, and I wouldn't be having this experience. And it was so blaming and shaming on myself, and I didn't realize that this is also my system is interpreting that as a threat. It's just coming from me. I'm the threat on my own system, constantly berating myself. Why did you make that typo in that email? Why did you speak to, why did you say it that way? You should have said it this way. And it's like constant. It's no wonder the system is going to like shut down.
Yeah,
Right.
those are some really
So
great tips that you had too, Ruth, about for educators, because that's our audience, our primary audience are paralegal educators. And just saying that whole having awareness,
mhm,
right? And then the self-compassion piece to
mhm.
follow that up. These are such important tools for us to be able to train to our students and say this, during our coursework, no matter if I'm teaching introduction to law or, law practice management or whatever course that I'm teaching. And Kelly and I have had the great fortune of actually having past conversation with you and learning more about your background because, as you had mentioned, you're like, I was the A student in me, right? Because I think that's kind of a through line for a lot of us legal
It
professionals. We're
is. I think
kind of type
legal
A, we're
attracts
kind
them.
of
Yeah,
right. And I know that when we had talked, you had mentioned this really fascinating framework that you have developed called the House of Well-being. So I wonder if you can kind of connect the dots for us in terms
sure.
of kind of awareness and self-compassion, and then maybe share a little bit about where you attained more education about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So the I came up for myself, and I mentioned I took a training at because I had gotten so much out of the mindfulness meditation. I stuck with it. I stuck with it. I've been doing it for it's like I think 13 years now, and I decided that I wanted to share that with other people. I really felt like, especially in the legal profession, it was helpful for me. And I feel like it's something that could be helpful. And so I went and I trained at UCLA. I was in a year-long program to become a mindfulness meditation facilitator. And the program at UCLA is very focused on, it honors the mindfulness meditation comes from Eastern traditions and other indigenous cultures. These are ancient practices that have been practiced for thousands of years. But now brains, like neuroscience and researchers, are studying our brains, and it's proving out why these ancient practices are very helpful. The program I took at UCLA was sort of an interdisciplinary program, and it was out of this part of the School of Neuroscience. And we studied it from a brain science kind of secular focus, but also honoring those traditions that they come from. And so I was so fascinated with how it all worked, and like, well, this is why the mindfulness meditation is working. And so I got very interested in that. And and then started to have conversations. And part of the other reason I did it was not only because it was definitely because I wanted to share it, but I also wanted to share it in a way that was going to be as accessible as possible. From in the legal profession, I didn't want to come in and start talking about it in a way that was going to turn people off. And I felt like coming at it from the scientific approach, the kind of like the developments that are happening in the secular mindfulness area was it felt very resonant for me. If I'm going out and talking to legal professionals, I don't start talking about some of the ancient traditions. I'm talking about like the processes that we were just talking about, like how our brains work and why the meditation actually has proven out to be helpful. So when I started speaking with legal, I've been doing this now for, gosh, probably um, it's been well over 5 years since I got my certification. But as I was talking to people, I was trying to have a framework to talk about like how this has been really helpful for me. And I mentioned this earlier, how personal well-being is. So I had this idea of a house. Like if you think about your well-being as a house has to have a foundation. So what are the foundational things for me? I'm not saying that this has to be for everyone else, but I really got clarity on this because I'm a continual, we all are works in progress. But the three things that really stood out for me that made a huge difference in my well-being, and I would consider that also part of my health, which is physical and mental health are integrated for me. It's all one. Is the mindfulness meditation is it's the foundation of my house. Is a foundation of my house, as is sleep. And I got very into sleep a few years ago because I started, I'm aging, and I was really having difficulty. I just thought, I'm just a bad sleeper. I'm just a bad sleeper. No, there were things going on that were interfering with my sleep that I mean, it's kind of funny to think of sleep as a skill, but it is. I mean, there are things that we can actually do to increase the likelihood that we'll get better sleep, and things we can do that will decrease the likelihood that we'll get better sleep. And again, it's very personal to the individual, but I had to figure that out. I had to spend some time understanding what I was doing that was interfering with my sleep, my own physiology, things like that. And a third part of my foundation of my house was really getting clear and clarity around my core values. And I wish I had done this like years earlier when I was talking to y'all about like how I was going through that phase. And Christine, when you were like, well, what did you do to handle all the, the anxiety? And I didn't do anything until, many years later. But pausing and doing an assessment of your own values, like your own core values of what really matters in your life to you without any judgment. And this is where the mindfulness meditation and the self-compassion are one, because you can practice mindfulness meditation and just become better at paying attention to what's happening. That's the definition of mindfulness, is paying attention to present moment with non-judgmental awareness and allowing it to be as it is. That's kind of a definition. But if all you do is pay attention and you're just really hard on yourself the whole time, like, oh, I suck at this, my brain is so distractible, I can't stay focused for five. That's not mindfulness meditation. It's with an attitude of caring and kindness. You don't have to be all squishy and all woo about it. That doesn't resonate with me. It's more of like this kindness and this protective fierceness, almost, of you're doing the best you can. Like, this is how the human brain works. You're not doing anything wrong. It's distractible, so you didn't get eaten by a tiger. Just talking to yourself in a way that is just kind and even and not mean. Anyway, so the third part of my house is that really understanding my core values. And for me, and again, I think it's such a great exercise to do. There's lots of tools out there that you can, if on the internet, that can help you. Like, there's coaches and things that can help you. But for me, it was just, what is really important to me right now in my life? And is it making as much money as I possibly can make? No, that's never been a driving force for me. Is it doing work that's meaningful for me with people that I respect, and working with a team of people that I honestly don't know how I would do without? I work with such amazing people at Cooley. It's very important to me. And like my family, my husband and my son, and just getting really clear on, because I wasn't operating all those years according to my core values. I was operating according to something that I think was just, I wasn't aware. It was just like, you have to be driven, you have to do this, everything's going to fall apart if you don't. I was being driven by a lot of fear and by a lot of scarcity.
Right.
So that's the foundation, and then I can go into the rest of it.
Yeah, I think I love how you have described, the foundation of your house of well-being, right? And how customized and unique it is to Ruth. And I think that's where it's really important for us as, your peers, your colleague, to understand each one of our foundations is going to look different, right? But there's so much work in that. So, given your role as a trained mindfulness facilitator and also co-chair of the Life and Law Committee of the Lawyers Club of San Diego, how do you see that educators, trainers, mentors could model and encourage this mindfulness and this, critical need for self-care in the academic environment, right? Before we're actually thrown into the legal environment where there's tigers every way you look. How can we implement this and model it in that academic environment?
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question. I know. So I also had the privilege of being an adjunct professor at USD for the past 10 years. This is my first year. I'm not teaching e-discovery law. And I tried to incorporate into my class at least the concepts of introducing this concept of, what are the things that you're doing to pay attention to these things in your life? What, just introducing those concepts to the students. I know that there are, different universities and schools are starting to have these topics. I have a very dear friend who is a professor at a university in Florida, and she's a law professor, and she teaches a class on mindfulness in the law. And I think that's so wonderful. I mean, I just think that's just such a, I hope more institutions do that. But I don't think without some kind of conscious attempt to integrate it into the curriculum, either as a course, but or integrating it into courses that you're teaching, which I think really anyone can do that in terms of just asking the questions: how are you taking care of yourself? What is the priority in your life on monitoring your well-being, and what do you do when you notice that your well-being is going off track? Those are things that anybody could bring to any class they're teaching or anything that they're involved in. But I think it would be so wonderful for it to be more integrated into the curriculum of these institutions, because again, I think the bottom line is we're all going to be more effective and more helpful and more skillful people if we're operating from a place of authenticity and care, and we feel like we're working in our alignment with our values, and we're feeling just like we're contributing, we're doing work that's meaningful to us. I think it's not a problem that any of us aren't going to work hard. I think if you're attracted to wanting to work in the legal profession, it's not risky that you're not going to work. It's just it like you said earlier, Christine, it's like type A personalities, like I think are drawn to the profession. I don't know that for a fact. I'm sure somebody studied it, but
Indeed, I think that you're right. I think that we're kind of driven people.
driven,
We're
driven
very
people,
driven in this profession. And I wonder, because I
very
remember
driven.
in our past conversation, Ruth, you had shared about Kristen Neff and her
Yeah.
work on fierce self-compassion. I wondered, because we had touched upon this a bit earlier in our conversation about this spiraling, right? Emotional
Yeah.
spiraling when we're faced with these stressors. But really, it's kind of something that we don't talk a lot about in this profession, but burnout. It's a
Yeah.
real thing. The struggle is real. And
It
I
is.
wonder what your thoughts are, because, being the head of e-discovery at a huge law firm,
Mm-hmm.
that in and of itself is a big role to take on, and I think about, that old adage of when when your cup is full, right?
Mm-hmm.
When your cup runneth over, that's when you're full, your tank is full, and you can give easily to others, right? Especially in that training and development context, which we as paralegal educators
Mm-hmm.
are tasked with in training our
Mm-hmm.
future legal workforce. And I wonder, what are your thoughts, and how can we model this to our students? I know that every class, before I start every class, I ask the students, I say, how are you doing today?
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone want to talk about something of concern or what's on your mind? I allocate a few minutes in the beginning of every class for us to have just community and conversation, because
Yeah.
those are the skills that I'm trying to train in my students, an
I love
introduction to
that
law.
you call them skills. Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
yes. So I'm
Yeah.
just wondering, can you share a little bit about that framework by Kristen Neff on fierce self-compassion?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have the book right here, Your Self-Compassion. I recommend it. And I have a list of like books and things that I'm happy to share with if you want to post it. So so I found Kristen Neff's work in those early days that I mentioned when I first started becoming aware of mindfulness and meditation, and Kristen's model. It's the model that she offers is there's essentially three parts of self compassion. It's this awareness, mindfulness that I'm hurting, or I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Just having awareness around what is happening in my system right now, which again, I think a lot of us have been taught to sort of override our the data that our own bodies are giving us over the course of our day, our weeks, pushing, ignoring, are we hydrating enough? All those kinds of things that are just really basic human needs. But so the mindfulness of being able to identify I'm struggling, like something's happening, and I'm having a difficulty with it. The second, and they're not in any order, but the second component is that being as a human, as long as you're human, you're going to struggle and you're going to have hard times. It's this concept of common humanity, that if you are living as a human being, you're going to encounter difficulties. So this it's almost like a counter to that alienation that I think when we are struggling that we feel. And so it's this part of the skill of in this model of self-compassion is recognizing that you're not alone. Even if you don't know who to reach out to in that moment, just like comforting your own self that I'm human, I'm part of humanity, we suffer. That's one of the things that is truth. Um, and then obviously reaching out for help if you need it. The third component is self kindness, which is basically just treating yourself with the same respect and kindness that you would treat anybody else. Certainly, if the somebody you love, I mean, treating yourself the way that you would treat somebody you care about, that's ideal. Some people, have a little bit of a hard time with that at first, and it's understandable with the way that we're, just kind of the things we talked about earlier with our culture and everything. And but just being just okay, this is really hard, and like instead of talking to yourself like, you're so stupid, or how could you do that, and whatever it is, like your own flavor of inner critic. There's lots of different ways to. We all have it. Everybody has it. Nobody. People might tell you they don't, but they do. um, and it just like being just I know that's really hard. I everybody has to find their own voice for that in their own way of that self kindness piece. I think that I don't know. It was the hardest one for me. I don't know if it's harder. I can't speak for other people, but that was where I had to do a lot of work. Was because there was, especially when you have a tendency toward, you know, sort of moving toward freeze and depression, you can start to become really hard on yourself. And so so the self-compassion, that model, I found it to be very, very helpful. And the fierce part of it is that, and I love this, it's just her work is so interesting. This idea, when we think of compassion, we often think of like, a little child going to their, someone like a grown up is hugging them and telling them everything is going to be okay. And it is nurturing, and that is a component of it. There's also, we forget that there's a very fierce component of compassion. And the example that she often uses is like firefighters running into a burning building. The idea of compassion is to alleviate suffering. That is the definition of compassion, to alleviate suffering in others or alleviating suffering in ourselves. And so this idea of fierceness is, and this was really pivotal for me. It really resonated. Like, oh, like I'm going to take care of myself, and it's like protection. The way that I would take care of my son if he was running toward the stove and he was about to put his hand on the burner and burn himself, I would say, stop, no, and I would pull him back and I would protect him. So if I notice myself going into habitual, and again, this has a lot to do with what I mentioned earlier about the way that our minds work. If I see those habitual patterns of being hard on myself and mean, it's not going to do, research shows this too. It pans out, it's not helping me. Beating myself up isn't going to make us better, even though a lot of people think that it does. There's a lot of research to support that it doesn't. But regardless, I am like, instead of like, oh, honey, Ruth, you're struggling. It's more of like, stop. That isn't helpful. What do you need right now in order to help right now? What is the need? Who do do you need to call? We can get into this if you want, but I have a whole little, in addition to the house, which I haven't finished giving you the structure on, I have kind of like a series of things. Like when I'm really struggling, I call it break glass in case of emergency, like you would in a building when there's a fire. You break that glass, and it's like, what is in my, if I break the glass, what's in there for me to do? And I have my break glass in case of emergency things that I turn to, and sometimes it's support, sometimes it's just asking myself, what do I need right now? Like,
I love, Ruth, I love that you're kind of, talking still about these pillars, right?
yep,
That are necessary for your house to be, for lack of better terms, erected, like, and staying up strong, right? And once we have that strong foundation, those pillars are even more important, right? If we want to keep the roof over our heads. And we can look at research like you have, and educate ourselves on maybe the importance of loneliness. Like the 2024 Surgeon General identified loneliness as a major health crisis. And I think in the last few years since the pandemic, this has been a consistent theme. And so understanding like our need for community and connection. So one way, in the educational side, in my law office fundamentals class, each course, each lesson plan, we talk about the emotional impact that this kind of work may have on us. And if you are somebody that your tendency is to lean one way or the other, then maybe this pathway isn't the best for you, maybe a different pathway in the legal
Yes.
field. Understanding that there's still numerous opportunities out there for our future workforce, to really plug in the skills that they have so that they can then curate these other skills that maybe are on the periphery. So how do we foster that sort of open culture where our students, our future workforce, feel heard and supported while they're entering that space?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I love One of the things I love about the legal profession is that, and I think folks that are not in it might not necessarily appreciate that there are so many paths. Like there isn't just one path. Uh, and I always found that to be just so, like, again, I chose a slightly different path than most people did. I chose a path that didn't exist, frankly, but that was cool because I was able to be like one of the early developers of a specialty that that just, when I went to law school, we weren't talking about e-discovery. It wasn't a thing. So this idea that there are so many opportunities, and that's one of the things I think what I love about the nexus between law and technology in particular is, it's like it's always expanding. It's always like there are always new challenges to face. And so I think what I would say to that is really tapping into creativity and having people think, instead of having a what they think they want to do in legal, which is important. It's important data. Like, I think I want to go be a trial lawyer. I think I want to go be a deal lawyer. I think I want to be a paralegal that works with technology, whatever it is. But keep that creativity and that openness to the path, and having educators continually exposing them to lots of different paths instead of the one traditional one that they might have seen on TV or something like that. It's such a rich profession, and there's just new things, new career paths, new specialties, new skills always to be developed. And we're in such an exciting time right now too with AI, and to tie that back into the well-being piece of it is to, I think this is going to be a really interesting thing to watch, you guys. I really do. That like this idea of like AI coming in and taking over, and how much is going to be done by the AI, how much is going to be done by the human, which for some people this is causing a lot of anxiety, as it should, not just in the legal profession. I'm talking just generally for us as humans. And I think it's going to be so important to be talking about these issues of what is it that we bring as humans, because no one is going to convince me that it's all going to become all AI driven. It's not. But the idea here that's so exciting, I think, for the next 5-10 years is, how are we as human beings bringing what is unique to us as humans to the vast amount of complex issues and problems that we have in our world. And we can't do that, like you were saying earlier, Kristen, about if our cup is empty, we can't give from an empty cup. Like, it's just we can't. And so so I think continually pointing people to just a broader, more open view of how things can be. Again, it's a really countercultural thing to do in a lot of ways. So is pointing out that we're, this idea of whole humans and taking care of ourselves is not a weakness. It's an important part of being able to be a helpful and skillful and kind human. And I think that's what we need more of in the world. So
Absolutely. It's fascinating that you actually say that because Kelly and I just did. We AFP has a spring virtual conference, and we kicked off the conference this year with navigating AI and ethics and technology. And the framework we gave it was, future proofing the paralegal profession. And it's exactly what you said. We cannot AI the human out of humanity. There is always going to be that essential human component. Right. And
Yep.
I think you're absolutely spot on. You have shared amazing resources with us today. I just wanted to kind of ask, is there anything else that you think that aside from the mindfulness training, which you said we can find easily online, and obviously you did that year-long, training at UCLA. Some of us may or may not be able to do that, but if there's any other resources, and also, in terms of your house of well-being, I know we talked about the foundation and other pillars. Were there any other things that you wanted to talk about with regard to that house of well-being, and then in addition to the resources?
Yeah, so I wish I could show you the visual of it because I have a visual of my house. But so I explained the foundation, and then the like the walls and the interior is, there's like everything is visual for me. So there's, a visual that depicts self-compassion because it's a core wall, pillar, foundation. You have the foundation and then you have the walls. I have you know relationships. Like, it's really important for me to have. I have my small but core group of friends. I have my husband, my son, our dog. And I say my dog because he's, again, a source of an incredible amount of joy. And joy is another thing that I have depicted in my like the interior of my house. And joy, what that means for me is, being out in nature, having a cookie now and then. Like, I always say, joy is a nutrient. Like, the things that make you, like, the sweetness of life, whatever that means for you. Obviously, nourishing your body, nourishing your mind with things that, creativity and, like, things that you enjoy doing. The other thing I have in my, and taking care of your body, like, just not like in the wellness culture, like, push yourself to you're about to drop kind of a way. I'm over that. No, I'm talking about, like, just movement that makes you feel joyful and happy, and that makes you feel good. Your body, like, enjoys that to the extent that you can. Not everybody can, but to the extent that you have the ability to take, to move and take care of your body, that's part of it's something that's important to me. But again, in a very balanced kind of way. I used to have a very unbalanced kind of view of that. So those are that's like kind of the main interior of my house. I have a little picture of it's a cartoon of a person watering a plant, and the symbolism of that is basically what you nurture and what you care for grows. And so if you're constantly nurturing negativity in your mind, self-harshness, just the stories sometimes that we tell ourselves about the way things are, rather than really stepping back and saying, wait, what is really, what am I listening to here? Whose voice is that? um, what you nurture grows. And so and again, knowing that we have this bias toward, looking for what's wrong, maybe taking extra effort to cultivate toward things that are going right. Like, I have a little list of what's not wrong right now. Like, make a list of what's not wrong right now. And then just in terms of resources, I highly recommend MBSR for mindfulness-based stress reduction. There, again, it's offered here in San Diego. It's offered through UCSD. They have a mindfulness center there. They also offer an 8-week class on mindful self-compassion, which is based on the work of Kristen Neff and Chris Germer. And they have, and so I really recommend those programs. You can, the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, these courses are offered all over the world. They're offered remotely. They're offered in person. There's a lot of resources on those kinds of, I would recommend that website as well. Books, finding, just reading. There's so many great apps. Like, if you want to start meditating, doing mindfulness meditation, I can give you guys a list. But
That
the
would be
Happier app
great.
is great. The Calm app is great. Some people really like, there's another one I'm forgetting right now that's really popular.
Mindspace, is that one?
Yeah, Headspace.
Headspace. Yes.
Yeah, I don't
Yes.
use that one, but yes, it's very, very popular.
Yeah.
And I really think those are so cool. Like, and just in terms of like from your questions about what can like educators do, what can organizations do, offering those kinds of things, like as access to like a meditation app or a wellness app or something like that. Those are things we do. I'm very fortunate. Cooley does that. We have a really, really, I think a very, very strong wellness program at the firm that really supports people in these endeavors that we've been talking about. And I know that's something that is a lot of organizations, universities, companies are starting to do that. So
Yes, well, you are a true trailblazer, and the team that you've put together, and the organization you work with, are true trailblazers in this. So, we look to model some of what you've done into our other systems because it's clearly working, Ruth. And so, we thank you for that. And thank you for sharing your thoughts and your information and resources with us today. We are going to add those to our show notes in the description. So those will be loaded up for any of our viewers or listeners. And, it's also really helpful because you're sharing resources that are going to help for training our future paralegals, legal professionals, as well as content development for everyone. So, to our listeners, we appreciate you joining us for this episode of AFB's Legal Luminaries. Pardon me. We hope that our conversation with Ruth has sparked some curiosity on what the future holds for the legal landscape. And for those of you that are eager to explore further, we will, like I said, include those relevant links below. And a special note and acknowledgement to Doug Lusk and the National Society for Legal Technology for their invaluable contributions to the post-production of this podcast. And as we wrap up, we want to leave you with a thought-provoking question. If you had 20 minutes to interview anyone, who would you choose to speak with? We encourage you to share your thoughts and suggestions with us. Thank you once again, and we look forward to having you with us on the next episode of AFB's Legal Luminaries. Until then, keep forging those connections and building relationships that illuminate the legal landscape. Goodbye for now.